The time in my life before I realized I was transgender, most of my early years, the thing that one will notice is I was always trying to be someone else because I was convinced that being myself wasn't enough. I had no idea who I was, and I was constantly comparing myself to other people, and it was also like when I got on the internet for the first time, I saw what other teenage girls were doing, and so I would just become a copy. I went through the bulk of this in middle school because my body was changing, and that was the first time that I felt wrong. Because I was obsessed with trying to fit in, like every middle schooler, but it affected me on a more deeper level because of the suppression of my gender identity. It wasn't until the summer of 2022 when I actually tried to dig deeper and I tried to figure out who I was and not just who I wanted to be. But I remember that summer I felt the entire burden of what being trans meant for the rest of my life. I was scared because I couldn't ignore this anymore, and I knew deep down that this was the answer I'd been looking for, and I didn't like it. I had to fully face it, and it was hard. It's hard for me to even talk about being trans because I feel like someone's gonna tell me that I'm just making it my whole personality. But the truth is that being transgender is something that affects me every single day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about it. Every time I pull a binder over my head, I am reminded that I was born in someone else's body. Every time I look at my body, I get this twisted feeling in my stomach. It reminds me that what I see is utterly and totally wrong. Sometimes my outsides is what I hate. I hate my outsides for betraying me and not matching my insides. But the sad thing is sometimes I hate my insides instead for not being normal or easy. And it seems it would be easier to change my insides instead of my outsides. And sometimes I try, but it never works. This is something that is at my very core. Something that is not defined by how I dress, or how I speak, or who I look up to, or who I see myself in. It's such a deep understanding that I know that it will never change. It's always going to be a part of me. Sometimes I think I'm cursed or diseased, and I will refer to my identity as nothing but unfortunate. And that's always when I feel like things will never get better. But being trans is so much more than shame and grief. Recently, I found an old journal of mine from middle school, and I found an entry talking about how I don't feel like myself and how I don't know who I am. And standing here today, I can confidently say that I do know now. Since discovering I'm trans, I've felt the most like myself than I have ever felt. And the other thing is I've become such a more thoughtful and reflective person, and I have such a deep understanding of my identity. Discovering my gender identity has helped me explore the other parts of myself, like my personality. And I know so much about myself just because of my journey as a trans person. If I'm being honest, I wish I could tell you that the things I talked about before about feeling shame or feeling grief, that they're over with and that I've overcome them and I'm all better now. But the truth is that this is something that I am living, and I really struggle to look for the positives of this experience. And this story isn't over. I don't know who's gonna hear this, but I honestly want the world to know that we trans kids are hurting. There are so many adults out there that think that we're naive and immature, and they use the fact that our brains are not fully developed to tell us that we don't know who we are. Yes, I'm hurting. Yes, I'm young. but I know damn well that I know myself better than anyone else does, and I am working on remembering and believing that when someone makes me feel ashamed of what I am. I am not diseased, I am not a mistake, and I'm going to use my story to show the trans kids of my generation that we are powerful and that the future holds a place for us. Thank you.